What do your sexual fantasies say about you? What does the absence in sexual fantasies say about you? Many women think they are abnormal, unsatisfied, or have mental disorders in general since they have these sexual fantasies. Sometimes a woman has certain sexual triggers that she doesn't satisfy and ends up feeling like her relationship is going downhill. Get really sexy, unleash your inner freedom, and build quality relationships with vivid orgasms by understanding yourself better and better. Let's go. Often, Angeline, women who are looking for such alpha males in bed are such angels. That is, yes, this is such a request. A hard man in sex have women of a godly kind. So they are actually feminine, gentle, affectionate. Why? It all lies in the unconscious. A woman feels shame during sex. It's unconscious. If you ask her how she feels during sex, she won't tell you. But if she comes to me for a psychotherapy session and we go in depth, she will see that she feels shame during sex. So sex for her is something far from spiritual. It's this strong sense of shame that is preventing her from having orgasm and pleasure. How do you get rid of the shame? You have to delegate responsibility for sex to the man. That is, I am not responsible for what happens in bed, but my alpha male. I was and still am feminine, so tender, affectionate, pious in general, an angel. And here he is, all brutal, passionate, hot, takes and possesses me. And that's the moment when her sense of shame goes away, because she doesn't take the initiative, she has nothing to do with it. He came, peeled off her panties, entered her heart. That's what he is, a beastly, such a testosterone man, and I have nothing to do with it. And so, a woman unconsciously looks for such a man to get pleasure in bed. That's the first thing. Second, when there's rough sex, there's a lot of feelings. And they duel the feelings of shame and embarrassment. That is how I feel my erogenous zones when he gives me a good spanking and so on. By the way, when a man spanks a woman on the ass, it allows her to be in the moment, here and now, to distract herself from all the thoughts that disturb her at this moment. Do not let her relax. And so through the pain, she relaxes and takes true pleasure. This is actually not a disorder of any kind. It's a normal story. It's just my accentuation. Now we can go with you into a disorder. Here, already, if a woman had an experience in her childhood when she was criticized, hurt, devalued by her parents, then look to the unconditional love for her parents, there is this feeling of pain and humiliation. That is, for her, the love that is formed with her parents is admixed with this pain. And unconsciously, a person seeks these feelings in adult relationships with partners. That is, it is not enough for her just love. She would like a little more. That is such a seasoning for the relationship. But, unfortunately, a woman can choose for herself an abuser and a tyrant. And in addition to sex with aggression, there he also suppresses her, devalues, offends, and destroys. So here, you need to keep your hand on the pulse. So this kind of hardcore sex is okay, as long as it doesn't hurt you, both physically and emotionally. Give it a like if you're interested. Well, to begin with, violence starts where the partner's boundaries end. That is, if a partner likes it and doesn't think it's damaging to them, then it's not violence. It's just healthy aggression in bed. A lot of men like that. So we need to capture that violence is when something goes against a man's will that destroys him, both on an emotional, psychological, and physical level. Now let's look at the fact that if we take the overall temperature across the chamber, there are more men who want a woman to dominate him than there are these women themselves. That is, women in general, if you take the statistics, when polled honestly, not on camera, women admit that they would like a man to dominate them in bed properly. There are quite a large number of them, but there are far fewer women who would like to be dominated by a man. That's not to say there is anything wrong with them, but just that there are statistically fewer of them. But there are more men, if you put your hand on your heart, who would like to be dominated. That is, if a woman has the skill to dominate in bed, she's all over the gold in the world of men. Can you imagine that? Here a good question. He's so bossy, say, Earth, thank you, I'm walking all over you. So, he's in control, everyone, so he's subject to him, but he wants to take the control away. Remember the story I just told you about the woman, the godly angel, who wanted to get rid of the feeling of shame. Also, a man gets rid of the feeling of control around a woman who dominates him. That is, he holds everything in his iron hands in business, and he really wants his iron balls to be supported by an iron lady. So he goes soft and fluffy, and he gave up control. At least here I can relax and obey this queen, but in the world I'm not going to obey anyone. And it's really good for his sexual energy, and he's having orgasms. Of course, if we take the psychotrauma, it directs him. It is also about that woman who loved her parents as a child, but pain was added to this love, and now love, as it were, is not conceivable on an unconscious level without pain. And now a man also wants to experience pleasure through pain. So pain brings him pleasure. Plus pain helps to distract, and paradoxically, but also to get aroused at the same time. Men really do want that a lot, but that again doesn't mean most men do. It's just taking triggers like this and trying to synchronize them between the world of men and women. So why would a woman want to dominate? That's probably the biggest question for those women watching this video. It's very simple. What we see in the world is that men still don't let women express themselves to the maximum. Social norms, social constructs say that it is difficult for a woman to dominate, to be a financial leader in business, in career, and so on. But if a woman manifests herself in bed as a mistress, it compensates everything very well. That is, her need for dominance is satisfied. My good ones, if you want to really work through your sexuality and learn about your sexuality even more and make it so that a man really dusts, blowing dust off of you, but he can't breathe you. And you knew what was going on with the man, what his sexual triggers are, how to satisfy him, to be the number one woman for him, how to make a man satisfy you in bed. And also, this course, this masterclass, it's about attracting a worthy man into your life and building a truly harmonious relationship. It's not just about sex, it's about relationships and your self-esteem in general. In fact, I like to say that often. If we're talking about sex and a woman confronts her sexual fantasies in a real way, she discovers she has this sexual trigger. That's not all of them. That's not to say that most women have this story. Now, if a client initiates a conversation about sex on her own, including sexual fantasies and triggers, I am willing to discuss it with her. Otherwise, my clients usually come to me for help with other issues such as relationships, self-esteem, trauma, and anxiety. But if my clients and I are talking about sex and the client takes me there, quite often we run into this trigger. Group sex. This is where we start to see the needs with the client. And what needs can be met in group sex. And the first is that many men want me, I satisfy them, and my self-esteem grows from that. That's one. Two, it means I'm the only one and there's a lot of them. They all want me and they satisfy me from different angles, so they caress my erogenous zones. around my erogenous zones, maybe even double penetration. It all increases sexual arousal. The third is the feeling of shame, that I am doing something forbidden, dirty, and it can be arousing. It is exciting and it immerses me in some kind of pleasure. So when we look at these needs, the question becomes, is it necessary to get into group sex? Because it's not always safe. It can often be drunk, it can transmit diseases, it can lower a woman's self-esteem. Is it possible to satisfy these needs for sex in a relationship with one man without resorting to such exotics? It turns out you can. The main thing is to learn how to properly communicate with your partner. The right way to get in touch with your body, because that's why there is a desire to have many men caressing me from different sides, because there is not enough contact with the body, erogenous zones can be blocked. There's not enough stimulation, there's not enough body contact. So I need to get harder. Good question. So let's look at it as psychologists. That a man can feel when his woman is possessed by several men at once before cognizing her in all directions. So to say, the first, yes, well, absolutely healthy emotion is aggression and jealousy. And even if a man has a sexual trigger, group sex, and so that men possess his woman, he, in any case, if she is not indifferent to him, will feel these feelings. Forgive me for the tautology, and it is those emotions, they are the cornerstone of his sexual trigger. That's the basis of his sexual fantasy that he wants to fulfill. If we look under an MRI, under a high-frequency microscope of our brain, that during feelings of aggression and jealousy, there's activity in the brain. These areas, they're near sexual arousal. So, in other words, feelings of anger and jealousy, they can kind of arouse sexual arousal. We have observed monkeys, I mean the scientific community of psychologists, sexologists, where a monkey had sexual arousal to his female as soon as another male tried to possess her. That is, on a physiological level, sexual arousal is triggered through jealousy and anger in certain individuals. But in a normal person, for example, it's like a woman walking, a man notices that other men are looking at his woman. He doesn't let his woman know that he's giving him a hard time or he's covered with feelings. But he experiences somewhere this feeling of even anger and jealousy, and it makes him sexually aroused to his woman. It's a kind of spice. When spouses fight sometimes, then it all ends in sex. So we see these animal manifestations in relationships, and it's normal. But there are not just accents in the relationship, but there are specific distortions, even disorders. I have a client case when a man confessed later in psychotherapy that he had been deceiving himself for a long time, but then he shared his insight that it turns out that I realized I chose a former prostitute as my wife because it really excites me and fascinates me so much that she broke down every time, and again I pulled her out from under the clients. So it caused him the strongest emotional connection, sexual connection, and formed this sexual libido in the relationship. As soon as he worked through this psychological trauma, the next time he didn't run to get her out from under the client. So there really are certain psychological traumas, the desire to be humiliated, the desire to compete. That's all that motivates a man to organize such games when there are many men and one woman. But, Anjali, there's another reason. It's when a man has hidden desires to make his testicles jump in front of his eyes more and more often.
Перед глазами прыгали все чаще и чаще.
He can't admit it to
Признаться он
himself.
себе не может, что
He's gone into
пошел в
sin
грех.
and he needs to get his head
Голову
fixed, so
ему
to
надо,
speak,
так
yes,
сказать.
but through a female guide.
Но вот через проводника женщину
He thinks it's soft enough, but he may not realize it.
безопасно.
Because it triggers the dirty mistress archetype,
Грязной любовницы.
there is an archetype, a model of behavior of a pious wife, there is a model of behavior of a princess, there is a worker, a queen, and there is an archetype of a dirty whore.
Работницы, королевы. А есть архетип грязной такой шлюшки.
And when a man calls a woman such dirty words, she activates this archetype, this model of behavior. It is easier for her to relax and be in the right state in which she wants. So here, in principle, who can forbid her? But sometimes, on the contrary, a woman is very offended that a man calls his beloved with such dirty words, activating the same archetype, and then they cannot agree, and the man does not hear her. Also, often, women come to me, on the contrary, start to slap her on the ass painfully, pull her hair hard. The man himself does not control this. This is also such a story when a woman offends a lot and sexual libido is blocked. If a man has 6 centimeters, he's already dominant. So the woman is beneath the man. And no matter how much she wants to get out from under him, it's going to be hard enough. So it's dominance. The act itself is simple. The penis enters the agin. The woman takes the man conquers the territory, takes that territory. So the act of dominance and submission is always about sex. Indeed, for the most part, men like to dominate women. And sometimes men get very carried away. And by the way, you know Angelina, who gets most carried away when he doesn't hear her boundaries, hurts her in bed, and so on. It's men who haven't satisfied their social need for dominance at work, in business, in career, and so on. So at least he's dominating here. Or, well, this is really such a sexual trigger, and here you need a traffic light technique. By the way, the traffic light technique can be used both in relations with her husband and in sex. Red is stop, yellow is let's take it easy and slow down, and green is super. It's the same in bed. So, there's red, like don't pee on me, in bed, don't handcuff me, don't bring me under your arms, that's red. Yellow is when, let's keep it down, you took my hair too hard, you're patting me too hard, or too much rhythm, slow down. And green is just go, just go, just go. Well, let's start with the first one. Why don't women like blowjobs? And it's a sense of humiliation. That is, a woman has limiting beliefs that she in no way cannot show her weakness, she does not need to humiliate herself. And it turns out that during a blowjob, she feels humiliated, and in the end, it does not lead to anything good. But then, we must realize that all the most valuable thing in her hands. One awkward movement with her teeth and no man. That's why it's a question of who dominates who, right, Angel? Next point. She may have had a negative experience in the past. That is, she gave a blowjob, and the man said to her, who does that? What are you? What is it? Go learn to give a blowjob. Well, some fucker in general, yes, got caught, and now she is afraid to give a blowjob. Well, the next thing is, of course, some beliefs, yes, religious beliefs and so on, that is all layered, so it is difficult for her. Also, a woman may not like blowjobs at all because she had an experience, for example, she gave oral caresses to a man and the penis smelled bad. The man just elementary did not wash himself and she does not want to face this story again. So here you need to see what negative experience she had, what attitudes about it, and in principle, if you work through it all, hygiene, sexual communication, partner relations, it can all be worked through. Sometimes you really just don't like it, that's all. And you don't have to force yourself. Accordingly, why do women like it? I don't this is just good to work through. Those who do not like, now we'll talk on it. So there are some motivations, some benefits to this blowjob. First of all, we have to realize that we have a concentration of nerve endings here. This is our erogenous zone. And when a woman gives a blowjob, she stimulates all the erogenous points in her mouth. And it helps her to relax, to get excited, to get pleasure. Second, many women have a sexual trigger to satisfy a man. That is, she gets pleasure from satisfying her man. And so, when she serves her man with these oral caresses, she gets aroused and feels her own value and even superiority. Next, so women just like the whole story, and when she sucks, pardon me for this expression, she calms down. So we go back to childhood, to the psychosexual stage of development. At the oral stage, the child does not take the pacifier out of her mouth. So the blowjob calms a woman down very well. Ask me what I'm translating such examples and parallels. I hope I'm not offending anyone's feelings. Well, you know, yes, that is such a story. It unconsciously happens. It doesn't happen like, oh, we need to remember childhood, suck on a pacifier, come here. So, yeah, well, no, that's not how it happens. But unconsciously, maybe a woman tends to do that. Here, also face fitness as if, yes, eternal youth. Here, well, it's a joke, of course, but nevertheless, in every joke, there is a bit of truth. So here, you need to correlate, yes, all the pros and cons, especially, well, it's strange to ask a man for quality cunnilingus if you yourself there do not give him a blowjob. Here, well, and we've only touched on some of the sexual triggers now. Even more sexual fantasies we discuss in our Telegram channel. Follow the link, subscribe. I published an article about how to openly discuss sex with a man, express your sexual needs and triggers, and learn about his. So, I look forward to seeing you all on our Telegram channel. Also, be sure to write your comments. What are your thoughts on the subject? Write your sexual fantasies, triggers. Let's discuss, let's chat. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget, put your bell on so you don't miss the next videos.